Hello and welcome to the 1912 Exiles podcast, the original, the biggest, the best Newport County podcast made by the fans for the fans. As always, we are brought to you by the Terrace Cymru Podcast Network and in association with the wonderful team at the Riverside Sports Bar in Newport, the city's home for live sport and great burgers. I'm Ed, and in the last episode where the gang reviewed the 2025-26 season, Reese said we hope to get one or two big interviews over the course of the summer. And here we are, back at probably a week ahead of schedule with one of those big interviews straight away. And it is a pleasure to welcome back to the podcast Mr Huw Jenkins, Chairman of Newport County. Welcome, Huw.
Yeah, hi lads. Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on. And also on the panel this afternoon is Alfie. Good evening to you, Alfie.
Good evening, all.
It is a roasting hot Saturday afternoon, and we have dived inside out of our gardens so that we can have a little bit of a chat about where Newport County find themselves going into this summer break. And we'll come on, Huw, perhaps to talk about the future and what next season might involve, and whether any further investment might be forthcoming, what news we might expect on signings. But I want to start, if we can, by reflecting on last season and a roller coaster end to last season. What were your emotions during those last couple of games at home to Oldham and away at Barrow?
Yeah, that's yeah. You would say that's why we all love football, but we us as a club there's no way we want to be in as much as we enjoyed the outcome of it all. We have to say, and I have to say personally, there's no way you want to be part of that every season. I think you know. Yes, there's always great to have something to play for in the last few games. We'll probably all acknowledge that. But sometimes it's nice to have a quite a plain, boring season and finish in the top 10 and leave the season drift away. But you say coming back to that point, the emotions up and down, and I don't think anybody could believe when you look at the detail of some of that games. Obviously, missing a penalty in the home game against Oldham, and then finally winning, and then virtually repeating it the opposite. Although it was a repeat, a penalty against us up in the away game in Barrow, and yeah, and obviously then it turns around again in the last 20 minutes, and it's in our favour. And then you look around after the game, then that. Yeah, that Harrogate went and lost, and it wouldn't have mattered whatever had happened. So it's a hell of a lot to take in, and emotionally when you're watching, and so much is at stake because ultimately we're all in it together. We want success, and being around the bottom of the table, fighting for your lives is something, as I said, we'd rather try and avoid at all costs.
Yeah.
Did you ever think league survival was ever in doubt?
Yeah, I'd be, the way we were at times, right? It'll be wrong to say that I had total confidence. And I don't go around making stories up and saying things. That there were times when we were poor last year, or this season gone, and yeah, it's just taken a big turnaround, I think, because yeah, the way we started the season, even in preseason games, was quite low key, and that drifted into the season.
Mm.
And then when we looking back at all those things, it's there's definitely doubts creeping, right? I'm not gonna say any different. I think we all had views on it, and we knew something had to change, and obviously, that's what we did, which changed the managerial setup, and tried to do what we could in January with players and different things, and you just hope that all of that kicks in quick enough to make a difference. And thankfully, although it was down to the last few games, thankfully we come out on top.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you saying at the fans forum that you backed the the players and the manager to turn things around and keep us up. And I think a lot of us were maybe skeptical at that point because we were looking down the barrel. But I mean, yeah, it was skin of our teeth. But as it turned out, yeah, you were right, and many of us who were perhaps a little bit more skeptical were wrong. But I suppose taking a step back, maybe, we did finish a few places higher than we did in 2024-25, but we did so with a much lower points total. We spent a lot longer in the relegation places. So, I mean, it was that kind of mixed bag. Do you feel as though, having made that managerial change, that we are now starting to make progress and that we are moving forward under Christian Fuchs?
Yeah, I can't hide from the fact, going back to the start of the season, looking back, perhaps the ingredients of the management team and players we recruited in the summer weren't right. I can't hide from that. I'm not going to sit and say anything different. I think the balance wasn't right in many aspects. But like always, when you sign players and at any club, I suppose you always feel you're going to get something out of them and what you saw prior to bringing them in. And then we look at other clubs in our position up and down the leagues as well. That why the clubs keep changing managers. Why have different managers come in our league, Crawley, Bristol Rovers, and then they've shot up the league, Shrewsbury. Managers and getting the right ingredient, getting the right atmosphere, getting the right motivation in that management team is everything. And I have to admit, our start of the season, the first 16 league games and cup games wasn't right, and that's I got to admit that. A club like ourselves, like many other teams, you're up against so-called bigger teams, bigger budgets, bigger players. And you have to have a strong mentality within the group that leadership is key. That you have to have belief in what you do. You've got to go forward with momentum that you can go in and win every game. And I think what typified it for me was we went and won a couple of games before the managerial change, and they were against so-called bottom clubs, smaller clubs. And to me, that just typifies that something wasn't right, because you've got to go into the so-called bigger games with nothing to lose, with even more appetite to win, because there's nothing to lose. And, you have to go into those games with the energy and motivation to win as many as you can. And I think that just typified for me. We went away and won at Harrogate and won at Accrington because I think they all felt they could win those games. And then when you were up against slightly different sides with a little bit more within them, whether it's players, managers, budget, stadiums, crowd, we tended to freeze. And I think that just hit it home to me that things needed to change. And obviously we made the managerial change. And I think your question about Christian, I think Christian has come in, didn't happen straight away. He wasn't like a quick bounce and winning 6 games on the trot. It's taking time, and I did feel, I think his personality and character and probably quite a relaxed way he approaches things, I think certainly helped our boys in the way it did, especially towards the end of the season. And all those things obviously made a big difference, and we started to get a bit more out of the players, which obviously we needed in the first half of the season. As always, to take the pressure off, I think you've got to start seasons well. You've got to get wins under your belt and settle things down, which we failed to do, I'm afraid, at the start of the season.
Yeah, I mean the Christian Fuchs point is fascinating because you're right. It's been evolution rather than revolution under him, and he's gradually just taken that group of players forward, and he has, from a fan's perspective, watching him on the touchline, been quite a calm influence, which I guess when you've got a fairly young, fairly inexperienced group, fans might be wanting him to get a rocket up the backside, but actually his much more calm, settled persona seemed to be the thing that ultimately got the most out of them. And maybe there's a lesson there for all of us that, yeah, it's while fans might be ranting and raving, the thing that the players needed was consistency.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what we felt. I think, as you touched on there, I think reasonable young squad that needed some experience. We tried to bring that in, obviously, in January. Few loan signings with relative experience to help in the right crucial areas. Yeah, and hopefully we also game by game we got a bit more competitive. You still need a bit of luck going your way and players finding form. But I think game by game, especially from March onwards, we got more competitive and yeah, and thankfully it helped towards the end of the season.
Yeah, so just going off what we just spoke about then, there was obviously the two main things that seemed to shift the dial with the appointment of Christian and then the signings in January, especially of Harrison Biggins and Sven Sprangler. Do you agree with that? And if so, what have you learned from those two appointments?
Yeah, I certainly learned that. I do agree. Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think I'm disappointed that we didn't get, as I said, collectively managerial set up right at the start of the season. Um, so I take that fully on board. I think, yeah, making sure that it is the right, and it's not just about experience, the right type of player and experience brought in to help us all get to where we want to get to is vital. Um, and yes, yeah, I think your question is right that those things did no doubt help us, and it does point the way forward to make sure that whether we use the term quality and not quantity going forward is the right thing, which will incorporate experience and strength and physique, as we all know we need in League Two. So I think all those things are fully on board, and we got to make sure we get this recruitment and all the things ready for the start of for the season ahead of us.
That's really interesting to hear you say that, because I think that point about the balance between youth and experience and skill versus physicality is, that's been the key thing from a fan's point of view, I suppose, that um, we've seen develop over the last 6 months since January, that we perhaps now have got that balance. It sounds as though that's in your mind, and no doubt in the managers going into the summer. And I suppose it kind of comes to a wider point about what else you think you've learned over these last 2 seasons. What are some of the similarities and differences maybe from when you took the Swans over when they were in a similar state, and how has your thinking changed over that time?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think the league is stronger. I think that overall, when we're talking about the Notts County looking to get promoted, MK Dons getting promoted, um, there are lots of clubs that come up from the conference and got promoted because they've kept going through the league with their budgets and their probably continuity within their squad. I think all those things have been, plain to see for me over the last 2 years. I think the big thing to me, a learning curve, and even though I'm 60 odd, I've still been in football 30 years. You still see things differently sometimes, and I think we didn't when I got involved. Obviously, it was at the back of Graham Coughlin's full year with the club. There was indifference before that with um, James Rowbury was there, and there was various changes, but I felt perhaps I underestimated we needed a stronger core group of players, which we didn't really have. And I think that every club that we see coming into the league getting promoted have got a strong core group of players, whether they middle-aged, 30-odd, whatever it is, they've got a core group of players to stay with the club. The biggest difference I found, obviously, most players are on one-year contracts, and very, very difficult to keep a strong core group of players over the last few years. I think looking back at the team that was at Newport previous to my joining, obviously, to me, when I look around at Mickey Dimitri and the way he's gone on and captained Crew, I think he would have been a great player to still be at the club. And players like Aaron Lewis, who I knew quite well, had gone on and done well at Mansfield. Cameron Norman had gone on and had a good career at different clubs. And I think there was a hell of a lot of good, solid professionals at the club previously. And I think perhaps I underestimated what we needed there, really, to make sure for us to compete, we needed to reinvent that core group of players that stayed with us over a few years. And I'm quite prepared to hold my hand up, and I underestimated that.
I suppose, to be fair to you, you were desperately unlucky with Matt Smith and Liam Shepherd, who, were there to fulfill some of that role, but have spent more time in the physio's room than they have on the pitch. And, that's all right. In some ways, maybe it could have been a little bit predicted because they've not had great injury records. But equally, if they'd stayed fit all season, they would have been the core of that squad, fulfilling that kind of role. So I mean, some of it is in the lap of the gods a little bit.
Yeah, it can be, but I still think we could have, overall we could have done better and made sure that that the right ingredients were there, and as I said, as we both talked about, I think the second half of the season has certainly pointed us in the right direction, to make sure that as we have to learn very, very quickly and make sure we progress and get a strong squad ready for next year.
Well, on that, I know Alfie's got a question about when we might start to hear news about signing, so I'll let him jump in there.
Yeah, do you know when sort of we'll start to hear about signings, new kit pre-season? Because that is what us as football fans like to obsess over the summer when there's nothing to do.
No, I agree. Obviously, for us, I think you touched on one of your questions. We quickly went into a period of getting the season tickets out and getting things moving behind the scenes. Of course, we want kit launches as quick as we can. And I don't know what date that is, but it's obviously imminent to do that. Signings and bringing players in are important. And what I would say on that, going back on previous years, I think we can't hide from where we are as a club. I know people see us, and the last few years probably hasn't helped in how other people see us when there's players moving around. So I think we need to be a little bit more cautious on perhaps waiting slightly to make sure that the right decisions are made, and sometimes you are waiting for players to make decisions and look at options, sometimes elsewhere before they'll come to us, and that's something we have to accept at this moment in time. There are clubs which we are actively talking to lots of players, but there are clubs in the leagues below us paying a couple of thousand a week to players. There are teams in our league and above us paying double that, and I think that's the bracket we're in. So we've got to be a little bit more cautious and not dive into the first thing that comes along. We've got to wait to make sure we do, as we touched on earlier, make sure we make the right decisions and don't eat up our budget too quickly, because there are players that will come around, as I said, and may suit and be the perfect one we're waiting for. So we are prepared to wait a little bit longer this year to make sure we make the right choices.
And I guess that's getting the loans right as well is always the key thing. And it always fascinates me that, we'll bring in loan players in August, September. It tends to be not until December, January that you start to really get a sense of just how good they can be. And I think, but Ben Lloyd was the perfect example this season. I think a lot of us were umming and ahhing in January about, well, is he really going to kick on? And then by the end of the season, he was really performing exceptionally well. But it's very hard to know, I suppose, for the coaches and the scouts who is going to make that step up. I mean, Michael Reindorf was one who we thought, oh, he's going to be fantastic after he scored that goal at Barnet, and then it kind of unravelled. And so getting those loan signings right when they're so important for a team like ours. I mean, have any lessons been kind of drawn from the last few years of what fits and what doesn't?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're spot on with your views. I think that have been learned, like the likes of, we just talked on, Sven Sprangler coming in, Harrison Biggins coming in. Just finding the ones that will make an immediate impact is important. We are not a club that can carry 30 players and we can pick 20 this week and leave 10 on the bench, and we can't do that. So we need to make sure that we're not going to take the risk anymore and we use the term which is often used in football. Many clubs use the term potential. We haven't got time for potential. We've got to have our 20, 24 players, and the majority of them have got to be ready to go and play and make an impact. If they can't do it, I think it goes to show that as we just touched on, we can't go back over it, but there's no way we're going to repeat the mistakes that we have made with some of those decisions, whether it's signings, whether it's loans. They've got to be players that physically and experience wise that and that could be playing 200 games like Huw Jenkins did in men's football. It could be many different views on that, but they've got to be ready to come in and make an impact from day one.
Yeah, and Huw Jenkins is the perfect example of that, of a player who came in, gave everything, and was the kind of breakout star, I suppose, of last season for many of us. Now, you alluded earlier to the fact that season tickets have gone up on sale, went up very promptly after the season finished. This episode will go out, I think, with about a week to spare before the renewal deadline comes up. Prices of season tickets have, to all intents and purposes, been frozen from last season, which is really great to see. But I want to ask you directly about why, in your mind, anyone who's kind of hesitating over renewal should go ahead and renew. I mean, obviously, the diehards, those of us who make podcasts about the club and obsess about it, renewing a season ticket is never in question. But there are plenty of people for whom it has to be a hard-headed decision, particularly families where, 2 adults, 2 kids, that's going to be £946, I think it is, in the seats. After 2 seasons of battling relegation, there will be people who are looking at it and thinking, is that a smart investment? What would you say to those people?
Yeah, I think number one is, it's, of course we want everybody around the area of Gwent to come and watch us. That's what we want. Everybody wants everybody there. The season ticket is obviously a big thing in football because it's, it virtually, as you just said, it cements their position as a big supporter of the club. So we obviously, for the club's point of view, we need as many as we can doing that. And again, I think they've, as you said, been priced fairly, and we try to make sure that is the case. I think a lot of things have improved over the last. Might not be all of the pitch, but if a lot of things around the club, I'm quite confident has improved. Might not be all visible, but we know that off the field, there's been big changes in staff there, and commercially we have grown. So the club is developing slowly. We've got a great relationship with VX3. Our shop sales have increased tremendously, and that's year on year. Shirt sales, sponsorship numbers are increasing over the last 6 or 8 months, and that'll look to develop the club further. So we're building lots of things, partnerships, and developing things. So the club is growing. I think that's the big thing. Ultimately, we're all judged on the pitch, right? We can't hide from that. But what I would say, as we touched on since we started the interview, we're going to do our best to not make the mistakes we've made. We're going to make sure the team is more competitive, and we all want something we can be proud of. And I think everybody getting behind the team, as I touched with going by the supporters, going by fans buying season tickets, all these things are just vital in helping the club move forward. And we can't forget, it's a very, very competitive environment. All clubs around us are growing and changing. And for us to compete, we need everybody behind the club as one, making sure that and provides us with every opportunity to try and move forward as a group as much as we can.
And yeah, just off the back of that, you mentioned the commercial department growing. I've definitely seen an increase in just the output online, because I'm a media sort of person. I've
Yes.
seen it's improve and everything. If you can tell us, is there any news on any sort of investment around the club? I think that's what a lot of fans would like to hear. Like, obviously, if you can mention it, and if there is, what might it mean in practice?
Yeah, and obviously I've seen that was one of your main questions, and quite rightly so. I was, come back to the fans forum, it was openly discussed as well. And what I can say, I'm, whether people believe it or not, I'm actively speaking to many different, probably potential options that can come in and help us. One of the main things, and I'll quite openly say this, as I did in the fans forum, whether it's an investor taking part of my shares, whether it's an investor taking all my shares, whatever needs to be done that I know will benefit the club, I will do. I don't see it any other way. But I think the times have gone when, I can revert back to my own experiences when you're looking for people to come into the club to put substantial amounts of money behind the club to move forward, whether it's to help to revisit and revamp Rodney Parade, whether it's to invest in the squad, whether it's to find our own training facilities, all these different things, and the way the commercial world has gone in football, we're talking millions, not hundreds of thousands anymore. So we need the right people who can actually do that to help the club. Because one of my main aims when I got involved was, one, to help the club stabilise, which I think within reason we've done that, apart from making sure the pitch is, what we do on the pitch is slightly or a lot better than it has been. But then obviously facilitating and finding a way to move forward with either with partnerships or new owners, whatever it may be that helps the club. You can be assured that I'm 100% behind anything that would help the club moving forward, and it's no connection on whether I'm there or not. I will do whatever needs to be done to make sure the right people are involved and can help us move forward.
And just to kind of probe on that, so I mean, I know it's really hard when there's discussions ongoing and different interested parties, but do you think that there is the chance of some investment coming in time that it can count towards this transfer window, given all of the Football League regulations around cost management protocols and that stuff?
Yeah, I got I think there's a good possibility of that happening. We can't forget. I think you all might have read. There's new rules out at the minute, and that's why I said about commercial income when I said from day one needed to be about 5 times higher than it was, right? And you commercial income, gate income, player transfers, all these things are connected to us being able to spend whatever 50% of our income on a player budget. They've also changed the rules that any investment, there's only 50% of that investment can get used. So that's two things, and we are handicapped at the club because we don't own no stadium.
Yeah.
A lot of the income that comes into the stadium is not passed our way to share, and also the costs of running the stadium are quite expensive for us as a club. So that offsets some of our probably opportunity to increase our playing budget. So everybody needs to be aware of that. And there have been new rules that even managers' costs are now included in the budget we're allowed to spend. So there's many things that challenge a club like ourselves without our stadium, with all the additional costs. And those are the challenges we've got to rise up and overcome. And that's when you asked the question about people buying season tickets, building up our crowd numbers, so we get in 5,000-6,000 a week. All these things will make a huge difference to us and allow us to just grow. And I think that all those things collectively will make a huge difference. And that may be, obviously, the other one could be the right investor coming in, as you say, at the right time. That can probably change the outlook and give everybody new motivation going forward.
I know Alfie's desperate to jump in with a question he's got about media and comms, but just first, just on the point about the stadium, because we had the leader of the council on a few months ago talking about his commitment towards sport in the city and wanting to see better collaboration between the council and county and the Dragons, and likewise you've spoken before about county trying to have a better relationship with the Dragons as the landlord. How are those relationships going? Is that moving in a direction that is perhaps more positive and might result in county having a more of a say in what happens at Rodney Parade perhaps than we have in the past?
Yeah, I think one of my main objectives was, I felt there was a poor relationship previously, and maybe rightly so, but there may be good arguments either side. But the first thing I felt when I got involved, we needed to have a solid working relationship, which I tried to implement straight away. So there's a good working relationship between us and the Dragons. Everybody gets on well, and everybody's looking to do the best for each other. So I think those things are great to go forward with. But that's, as I just touched on, the challenges are that whether we can bring in naming rights and various things that you can bring into a stadium and share those rights and all the different things. Obviously, those are opportunities we've got to keep probing and trying to find ways of making them work for both parties if we can.
Yeah, so as I previously touched on, commercial with Sam coming in, bringing a lot of new videographers and people in. It's been really improved, and as someone who has previously worked in the media department, I just see everything and just. But earlier in the season, there was a lot of debate around the media output, particularly with the headlines, fan subscribers, clickbait, and AI written, even though they weren't AI written. Looking back, do you think the club got the balance wrong at times?
There's two ways to look at that. It did create headlines. It did create a bit of interest. Whether you all think it was the right interest or not is open to debate, right? But I take on board the point, and obviously things have changed, and I think they've settled down on that school, because ultimately, we don't want to be making headlines for those type of reasons. We want to be doing it for work on the pitch, and perhaps promotions in a different way, you know. But I take on board. I don't think they were things were perfect, but I hope you'll agree they've all settled down now and working in a much better fashion with which I touched on, is some good changes in staff, and we seem to be on a good path, and hopefully we can retain those staff and keep moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the interactions that we've had as a podcast with Sam as the new commercial director have been incredibly positive. He's full of energy, full of ideas. He's he's a whirlwind, but he's definitely brought some energy to it all.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Huw, thank you very much for this. Just before we finish, one final question from me, which is just about when there are plans for another fan forum. Is there going to be an opportunity for you to kind of speak directly with fans during the summer break, or will it be something you'll look to do early on, start of next season? When do you think that opportunity might come up again?
Yeah, I think obviously speaking to Arnie with the trust, that we're trying to get something. I'm sure um, next month or July. Still, certainly going to be done before the season starts. I think that's important to keep that going. And yeah, and like always, hopefully we got more information on players and maybe investment and different things that can give everybody encouragement going forward.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It's hugely appreciated. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, boys. Thanks, Alfie. Cheers.
And listeners, rest assured, we will continue to bring you updates throughout the summer break as things develop. But until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, and above all, as always, keep it county.